to get back into his spiritual sense. But the impression of what he saw had gone deep into his consciousness. And then he left that place. He came back. He brought back the flowers to his father, gave the flowers. He sat there. His father was asking him, now you do this, you do this. And he was a bit absent-minded. He kind of wasn't there. And then he was thinking and thinking and thinking of what he had seen. And at the next convenient time, he went back to the same place as soon as he could. And he went around and he asked different people if they knew where that woman lived. And finally, after some time, he found her. He became, you could say, obsessed by this desire. And he went to visit her. And he told her, I want to take you home with me. And she laughed at him. She said, you can pay me first. And he said, no, I want to take you home with me. So she agreed to come to his house. And when she got there, she saw that he had a wife. And she said, you brought me here? You've got a wife. And he said, yes, but I want you to be my wife. And she laughed at him. And she said, then get rid of her. And he did. He sent his wife back to her father's place. He said, I'm not satisfied with her. She's not behaving properly. You should take her back. And he brought that prostitute, first as a maidservant, into his house, and then as his wife. What a disaster. Can you imagine what his parents were thinking? And he was completely infatuated with her. He lived with her. He ate the food she cooked. He tolerated her profession. She was a prostitute. She wasn't a chaste woman. And as he was trying to please her and keep her there because she wanted money, he started using his father's money, taking whatever money he could get from his father to satisfy her. And some authorities say that his mother and father were so heartbroken. They were so heartbroken, they moved out of their house and they went to live on the edge of the village. They had to see this. They went to live on the edge of the village in a small hut. And he used all the money he could get. And gradually he had to start stealing money. And he had to work out all kinds of ways to keep this prostitute attracted to him. Because a prostitute is a prostitute. Her mind is fickle. She's not interested in anything kind of chaste and regular. She's interested only in enjoyment. So Ajamil started cheating, lying, gambling, anything he could do to get money. And in the Bhagavatam it says that he was supporting the prostitute and her children, which indicates that not only were some of those children his children, but the other children were her children by so many men. He had become so degraded, so far away from what he was when he was a young man. And another interesting piece of information was that at some point in his journey through life, some kind of a sadhu came to his house, just as sadhus go door to door. And he offered some kind of service to this sadhu. Not very much, considering how degraded he was. And the sadhu, in reciprocation for his gesture, he told him, if you have another son, by this time he's an old man, he said, if you have another son, name him Narayan. And so in his 80s, he had a son by the prostitute. It was such a sad story. Everything gone, all of his good qualities destroyed, and so many bad qualities growing and growing and growing in his life. And he didn't even know or care. He'd long forgotten what it was to be ethical or to be righteous. All those things had gone. And he was living there with the prostitute, and he had his son, and when the son was born and the son was on the mother's lap, he called for the son, took the son on his lap, and he said, "My son, your name is Narayan." And then from that moment on, because he loved this child, it was almost like a grandchild, he would call the boy, "Narayan, Narayan, come here, Narayan, put that there, Narayan, bring me my this, Narayan, go over there, Narayan, do this, Narayan, do that." He called his son, Countless times he was calling his son. And as his life progressed, it came time for his departure from this world. And as he was lying on his bed, he was feeling quite unwell. He saw before him, coming towards him as he was struggling to breathe, because it was about time for him to leave, he saw these fierce characters coming towards him. They were horrifying. And they had ropes. Just like, in some of the old-fashioned American movies, if somebody was a criminal, they would put a rope around their neck and they'd hang them. So they had like hanging nooses. And they were coming to take the soul out of the body. Death means the soul is going to be taken out of the body, and the body falls down, as it always has been, lifeless. Because the animating soul has now been removed. And he was terrified. And what did he do in his terror? He called his son, because his son was so near to him and gave him so much happiness. So he called, "Narayan, Narayan." And exactly as he called Narayan one time, these extraordinary personalities appeared. He was in a coma, and he could see these extraordinary personalities who appeared on the other side of the bed. He's there. These fierce characters are on this side who are threatening to drag him away, certainly for a hellish punishment. And on the other side, these exalted transcendental beings appear. And they have all the emblems of Lord Narayan. And they immediately, in a voice that sounded like thunder, they tell the personalities on the other side of the bed, "Stop! You cannot take this man." Very dramatic. And these are the servants of Yamaraj, these are the servants of Narayan. So the servants of Yamaraj immediately say, "We must take him. He is sinful. We must take him because he needs to be punished." And the servants of Lord Narayan say, "Then first of all, please answer our questions." And they ask them 3 questions. What are religious principles? What are the symptoms of irreligion? And what is the process of punishment? What is religion? What is irreligion? And how should one be punished? And the servants of Lord Yamaraj, who is of course the Lord of Death, who awards punishment, they began their lengthy reply. So they began by explaining that the Vedas have come from the mouth of Lord Brahma, and they come from ultimately Lord Narayan. And Lord Narayan has made the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And there are so many witnesses. And the air is witnessing what you do, the sun is witnessing what you do, the Lord finally in your heart is witnessing what you do. And if someone deviates from the Vedic principles, then we come and we punish him. And then because everyone somehow or other a little bit must deviate, so everyone is actually punishable. And religion and irreligion, because what is religion? What is irreligion? Religion is to follow and irreligion is not to follow. And proportionately to the degree that they're irreligious, we punish them for their benefit. And Yamaraj, he's the Lord of all the punishment. He is so subtle, his power is so great, that he's just like the Lord in the heart. He witnesses everything. He sees everything. He knows exactly the proper way to get this person to atone. We heard about atonement. Instead of one way to atone is to do good, the other way is to accept punishment. If you do something bad, you take the punishment and you've equalized. So he gives the punishment. And so they spoke like this and they said, so therefore, according to somebody's desires, they act, and according to their actions, they have to take another birth, and according to those actions and their desires, they take more actions and more desires. It's like an endless, like a cocoon. They're trapped in it, this cycle of acting and desires and acting and birth. And this is a very awkward position. And so, they have to be taught how to act properly so they can be saved. This is what the servants of Yamaraj said. It's very logical. They didn't say anything wrong. They didn't make anything up. But it sounds quite somber, doesn't it? You were to sit there feeling like, uh-oh, what's going to happen to me? So then, as they were waiting there, they had given their answer. The servants of Narayan looked at them and they shook their heads and they said, it is so painful to see irreligion in the disguise of religion. They were saying, everything you said was irreligious. Everything we said is irreligious? Nobody's ever checked us before. How can this be? And then the servants of Lord Narayan said, you are punishing a sinless person. They said, a sinless person? And they actually accounted all of the things that he had done. And then the servants of Lord Narayan said, Yamaraj, who is your master, is making a big mistake. And they said, wait a minute. How can you say that? He was so bad and Yamaraj is so great. Why are you saying this? And then they said, if people in general who are simple, if they see that their leaders disobey the rules and principles of religion, how can they be peaceful and happy? And today we see so many leaders, they disobey the rules and principles of religion. How can we be happy? How can we trust them? How can we believe they have our best interests in mind? How can we believe it? We cannot believe it. So this was the arguments of Lord Narayan's servants. And they said, this man, they pointed to Ajamil, who's lying there terrified, he has already atoned for every sinful activity he ever performed. It's all atoned for. And not only that, everything into the future that he will ever do, it is all gone. It is all gone. And they said, simply one time And Srila Prabhupada expressed this also. One time chanting the name Narayan is enough to release him from every sin he's ever committed. They said these 4 syllables, Na-ra-ya-na, attract the Lord's attention. When he hears his name, they attract the Lord's attention. And he says, this man has chanted my name and he deserves protection. And the Yamadutas got really upset and they said, he didn't chant the Lord's name. He chanted his son's name. He wasn't thinking of Lord Narayan. He wasn't calling to the Lord. He was just calling for his son. He's so sinful. How can you say these things? And the servants of Narayan said, he gave this name to his son, but it is not his son's name. It is the Lord's name. He gave the Lord's name to his son. So when he called his son, he chanted the Lord's name. And because he chanted the Lord's name, which has such power, the first time when he took the baby on his lap, the very first time he chanted Narayan, he became sinless. And this is the most amazing, actually, pastime. I must admit, for years and years, I couldn't understand it. How did he become sinless? He kept sinning. How did he become sinless? And then I realized, well, even the servants of Yamaraj couldn't understand this. They had to go back and have this explained to them. How could this horrible person doing so many abominable things be considered free of any sin? And Ajamil is lying there in the bed, looking like this, and this conversation is going on. Who's going to win? And he's listening to the conversation. He's hearing this. And as he's hearing this discussion about the glories of the Lord's holy name, Ajamil becomes awakened to his actual position. So then they say, they continue on and they describe the power of the Lord's name and say whatever sins are performed, the Lord, when he hears his name chanted, he will give that person protection. And then my verse, this verse here comes, and now you can understand why they're saying that whatever happens, if one chants the name of the Lord and dies in some unfortunate way, he will never enter into any kind of hellish life, even if he's sinful. So the servants of Yamaraj recognized the servants of Narayan were not going to let this, they were not going to let them take him. They were not going to let this go. And they left, although they were very disturbed. And then, just as Ajamil was about to talk to these extraordinarily beautiful persons who had come and saved him and express something to them, say something to them, he turned to them and they disappeared. And he thought, was this a dream? What was that? What happened? What happened? And now he was awakened to what his life was actually like. By this conversation, he began to understand something, and he looked at himself and he thought, what have I done? I was such a pious family member. I did everything I could to cause pain to my parents. I married a prostitute. I ate all kinds of horrible things. I killed people. I did so many things. And in his mind, perhaps he was thinking, perhaps they'll come back, because he knew the things that he had done. But he was so grateful for the release that he had achieved, that he aspired to immediately leave that place and purify himself further. So his sins had been nullified, neutralized, removed. But he had further that he had to do. He now had to develop his devotion, his bhakti. And similarly, many of us, now in this room, I see many pious faces and people who have been devotees who have been born into devotee families. So in a sense, no impious activities were there. But when Srila Prabhupada was present, he was dealing mostly only with Westerners. And our lives were so impious, so unfortunate, so full of sinful activities. But we never knew they were sinful. And Ajamil also, this is one of the key points in why he was sinless. He didn't know he was addicted to sinful activities. He didn't even know they were sinful. So he wasn't misusing the Lord's name. And when you become a devotee, ironically, you have some knowledge. It's a little bit easier, if you're still a little bit sinful, to misuse the Lord's name. You think, oh, I'll do this and this and this, and it's no problem because then after I'll chant my rounds and that will be balanced out. And this is considered one of the offenses that we have to avoid. So Ajamil, because he was totally ignorant, he made no offenses. He didn't know that the Lord's name, he wasn't even calling the Lord's name. So this Leela is not to glorify a sinful person. It is to glorify the power that is there inherently in the Lord's name. And how even an offenseless, sinful person, when chanting the Lord's name, will receive the results very quickly. And Srila Prabhupada says, if Ajamil, who is chanting neglectfully and carelessly, receives the result of the Lord's mercy, what to speak of those who are seriously trying to chant Krishna's name from their hearts? They should be assured that the messengers of Lord Narayan, who travel everywhere, always, are always looking after their protection. So, I chose this particular verse. I'm going to, is that ready, even slightly charged? I want to let you hear something from Srila Prabhupada on this verse. And then I'll tell you why this verse is particularly dear to me. See if I can get this so you can hear it. Okay, Srila Prabhupada is reciting the verse. Can you take it up? I'll pause this. Right?
These are some of the practical examples. There are persons who criticize chanting of Hare Krishna mantra. Now because the glories of the holy name.
So there are persons who criticize the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra because they say that this is too much. How can I believe this? This is too much.
I described that one can become free from the sinful reaction of life simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord. So sometimes those who are not in in the line, they think it is too much. It is too much. So, the next class, it is advised, not it is too much, you can taste it.
You can test it.
Taste it.
Test.
What is that taste? Potito. When you fall down from a high place, suppose from the room, you may fall down.
When you fall down.
Potito. Skolito. You may sleep and fall down. Bhagno. By falling down, you may break your bones.
These are all possible.
Thunderstorm. You may be bitten by some animals, cats, dogs, snakes. There are so many domestic. Then stop talk. You may be burnt, and ahuta. You may be injured from others. Then, during this time, you can taste.
So here's the first point. Srila Prabhupada is saying this is practical. If any of these difficulties occur in your life, difficulties or disasters, it is practical. You can test it. So this is how a devotee must be. I want to test this because at the time of death I want to be as strongly prepared as possible. I don't know when that is. So therefore I have so many tests are coming. Very practical.
Practical. What is that taste? Pri iti avasena aha. Try to chant Hare Krishna. Kumar, if anyone does so, na arhati jatana, he immediately feels that from the injuries, you are not feeling pain.
So what an interesting reward comes as a result of testing. Prabhupada is saying that if you try and test chanting Hare Krishna in all these difficult times, from the injuries you won't feel pain. And now he gives this final test.
This is practical. In the snake bite, it may be said, the author says, never says that he may be saved from death, but the suggestion is that you may not feel much pain. This is practical.
So the last point Srila Prabhupada says is, the author doesn't say that you will become freed from death, you can avoid death, but he says that if you chant Hare Krishna at the time of death, you may not feel much pain. So this is, I have to stop very quickly because I've gone 5 minutes over my prescribed time, and you've got a very intense program here. But please try to take in as much as you can or whatever you can. In 1.5 days it has to be intense. Otherwise you will get nothing because it's such a short time. Please try to take advantage of the time here and try to get some points. It's also very helpful for those who are capable to take notes because somehow or other it anchors you because the mind tends to go here and there and so on and so forth. So I will stop at this point. Unfortunately I cannot take time for questions. If there are any questions I can speak with anyone at a different time. Thank you for your patient listening. And I think it's time now, although Kesava Prabhu hasn't appeared, it's time for breakfast.